Hello everyone from the Novedge team. Welcome to today's webinar, Getting the Best from Vectorworks 2017's Resource Manager. In this webinar, we will look at the structure of the Resource Manager, ways to use this, how it has been implemented, and where to store resources so they're available. In this webinar, you will also learn how to control the Resource Manager, how to update libraries, how to download resources, how to use search in the Resource Manager, and so on. So very, very useful webinar. That's why, you can watch it now, or if you have to go, it will be recorded and later posted on our YouTube and Vimeo channel, as just look for Novedge. And now a little bit more about Jonathan, if you don't know him already. Jonathan Pickup is an architect trained in New Zealand and in the UK with more than 30 years of experience. He has been writing and producing Vectorworks manuals and providing customer support for more than 15 years. His company, ArchonCAD, is the premier provider of third-party manuals and training resources for Vectorworks. He also runs the Vectorworks Online User Group and provides its main direction. And before we get going, here's an overview of what we do at Novedge. Here we are. Novedge is one of the largest online stores for design software. We offer a huge assortment of software solutions that cater to virtually every designer's needs. So if you're a designer, architect, landscape designer, just come on over. We have you covered. And for more daily software news and limited time promotions, pay a visit to the Novedge blog and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, and all the social media. Coming up next week, what's new in Creo 4.0. And also, last but not least, remember that this webinar is being recorded and you can watch it over and over on YouTube and Vimeo. And now I'm going to share Jonathan's screen so we can start his presentation. Take it away, Jonathan.
Thanks a lot, Barbara. Let me just bring my other screen across. So this is the handout that I've given you. So if you haven't downloaded the handout yet, please download it. Now this handout is a shortened version of the manual that I write for my online user group. So I'm going to be going through, I'm just going to keep it off to the side so I can make sure I cover everything. But if you haven't downloaded it yet, you really should download the handout that I've given you. It covers all of the basic stuff for the Resource Manager. The Resource Manager is quite new, so this is the full manual, and so I just wanted to show you this is what you'll be able to have a look at. So you can see it's got pictures and things like that. So I'm just going to push that off to the side. So I'm just going to keep that as an aid memoir or just so that I can keep track of where I'm going with it. So let's have a look at our Resource Manager. Here it is here, my Resource Manager. If you don't know where to find the Resource Manager, let's start with that. So Window, Palettes, and Resource Manager. And on a Windows machine, it's got the Auto Hide button. On a Macintosh, there's a little Auto Hide button just here. It's a little minus sign, or you click on it, it becomes a plus, and that will stop it automatically hiding. So for today, I'm going to keep it open most of the time. I'm going to make it as small as I can, but I need to keep it open most of the time so that I can show you all the parts without it keep hiding on me. So you might think, first of all, that the Resource Manager is nothing more than a kind of an updated resource browser. I mean, it looks a little bit like the resource browser, just looks a little bit more modern. There's actually a lot more to it than that. Let's start by looking at something like this favorite that I've already got here. I've got some details here. I just wanted to open the details and have a quick look and show you something. So what we have here on the left-hand side is we have a list of files that we can look in. In this case, I'm looking into my favorites. We then have a series of resources. Now the resources that I'm looking at depend on whether you've chosen to look at all the resources or something else. I'll come back to that. So we have our files, our resources, and when you click on a resource, you can see the preview just in this area. The preview gives you an idea of what the thing looks like. So if I make this window bigger, you'll see you get a really good idea of the preview. You can just about read the text on that preview. So if you're looking for a particular detail that had particular text in it, this would allow you to do it. The resource browser, on the other hand, used to look like this with the thumbnail. You didn't know really what that was all about. Now there's also something else, and that's this idea of tags. So I'm going to come back to talk about tags later. So at the moment I just wanted to cover some basic stuff. So we've got our file, we select it, we have our preview. Now it depends on what sort of things we select. If we go back to here and we look up here, we can choose what kinds of things we want to look at. So do we want to look at gradients, for example? If I look in my favorites, it's only showing me the gradients that are in here. We can choose what we look at in this area by clicking on these options at the top here. These are like filters that allow us to turn on or turn off particular parts. So this part, the Vectorworks libraries, these are Vectorworks libraries that come with Vectorworks. When we click on that, you'll see that we now have Vectorworks libraries here, with a little arrow. Click on that and it opens up the entire folder structure for all of those library objects. We can look in our defaults. So these are default objects stored on our computer. My default gradients are stored there, and now I can look into all of my default gradients. Have a quick look, see what they look like, and if you don't want to see your Vectorworks libraries, you can hide them. So this is our Vectorworks libraries. These are our subscription libraries. So these are things that come with the Vectorworks Service Select or VSS. If you haven't got VSS, you won't be able to get access to these subscription libraries. We also have our user and workgroup libraries. So in my user library, in my defaults, I have some hatches, cabinets, and other things. But you'll notice that it's quite a short list, and this list will change depending on what I choose at the top here. So if I choose all resources, you'll find that these folders change. Let me just go back up to the top here. I don't want to look at my favorites just at the moment. So let's just hide those a little bit. So we can look into our user folder. This is our what we used to call our default content. We can look in our Vectorworks libraries. We can look in favorites, and we have the subscription online libraries. And you can reorder these if you want. So if you want to get to your user libraries more easily, you can drag that up. If you don't want to see your subscription libraries, you can drag those down. But also, you can turn these off. So you can turn off the subscription libraries, turn off your user folder, turn off your Vectorworks libraries, turn off your favorites, and now all you can see is what's in your open file. So we can use those as a filter to see what's there. When we're looking through a specific file and we want to see what kind of resources are there, we can choose to look at all the resources, or we can just choose to look at gradients or hatches or wall styles and so on. So that you do have to remember to make sure you choose these, or make sure you choose the right one. If I'm looking at plugin objects and then I go to look for a hatch, it won't show me hatches. So if I want to see hatches, I've either got to go up here and choose hatches, otherwise I have to choose all resources. So just be careful of that, because it's quite easy, and when I first got the Resource Manager, I did it quite often. I'd be looking for a symbol, but I'll be looking at hatches. Where's my symbols gone? I don't understand it. I must, but it actually turned out that I was just being a little dense, and I should have just picked up, clicked there and gone all resources, and then I could see all the resources that are in my file. This is our action button, or our gear button, and it allows us to do things like add a new favorites file, remove a favorites, and so on. So I'm just going to select that one. I don't want that one anymore. I'm going to remove that favorite. So remove from favorites, and now it's gone. I might want to add a file to my favorite. So let's go add new favorites files. So it opens up my Vectorworks roof accessories. I think I've added that already. Let's add the file that I had the other day. I've been working on this recently. Drawings for a landscape project. So let's add that as a favorite. So I choose it, click on open, and it opens up this dialog box for me. So this dialog box allows me to add just the, I can add the favorite to what's known as the root level, which is the top level here, or I could choose a folder, and I've already created a folder, and so I could say add it to my manuals, because I've got a lot of these manuals. So let's add it to a folder so that when I'm looking into one of my manual files, It's easier for me to find it because I stuck it inside a folder called manuals. These are the ones, these are the files that I've used when I've been creating some of my courses. So I can look into the resources I've used from that course or that course, my roof accessories and so on. So you can see in my drawings for landscape, there's a whole lot of resources, wall styles, all sorts of things. So we can add favorites, we can remove favorites, we can refresh libraries. So we'll come back to refreshing libraries. And we can also select a file and open it. We can also show it in the Finder or show it in the Explorer if we need to locate that particular file. If I jump around a little bit, go inside here, go into my favorites, have a look in this file, have a look in that file. I've been jumping around a little bit, and each time I jump in to look inside a file, Vectorworks is remembering where I've been. So I've got a back button. So I can use my history back, and I can go back to the last file I looked in, go back to the one before that, go back to the one before that, and if I go inside a folder, it'll remember which folder I went inside, and I can step inside that folder. So that can be quite useful when you're doing a lot of looking for things. It can be very useful to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look, I thought I had some 3D people there, and I can't remember which one the 3D people were in. I think it was that one, 3D people. So I'm going to move a 3D person from one file to another. So I'm just going to drag this person and drop them into my untitled file. So the Resource Manager now allows you to drag and drop, organize your resources, which means that you can then drag this 3D person from this file to that one, or you could drag the entire folder. So if we go back one level, there's my 3D people. I can drag that entire folder and drop it into my library. Just want to go back, so let's cancel that because I don't want to do that. I'd like to show you how we look at our resources. So there we are, there's our resources, there's our person. Right click, I can set the thumbnail view to be a right isometric, which is the one in this case. If I go back to top plan view, not so meaningful, this particular person, right isometric works better. Right click again, we should have that rendered. If we render it, it might give us a better idea of what that thing looks like. In our preview, we can also choose the view, and we can also choose rendered view. So now with the preview, you get a really good idea of what that resource is going to be like before you go ahead and start to use it, which I think is really pretty cool. If I'm in this file here, I can go to a foundations. So that's my active file. You can see it's in bold. I can right click on a detail and I can choose import. But as we've just noticed, not only can you import the resource from one file to another, but you can also drag it. So I can drag that file across. We can export. You remember we might, those of you that use the resource browser might remember there's an export function where we can export that somewhere. But we can also drag and drop that if we want. So I've got a question, is that moving or copying? It's copying. So when I drag this resource from one location to another, I need a file to drag it to. Let's create a new blank file. Where's it gone? New blank file. So I've got another blank file. So when I drag that resource from Untitled 1 to Untitled 2, it makes a copy. It doesn't remove it from Untitled 1. It's still there, and it's now in Untitled 2 as well. I just want to close this now. When we have a look at our resource manager, and we want to use a resource from the Vectorworks libraries, let's have a look for something that I haven't used before. Let's look at building services, let's look at sanitary, Let's say I need a bath of some sort, American Standard. And here we go, I need American Standard bath. So I click there to have a look, and now I can look through all the bath objects that are there. A lot of these are 2D only, but there's a nice 3D bath, and I want to import that bath into my current project. So I could right-click and import, but just before I do that, I'd like you to notice that there's a little arrow here. There's a little cloud icon with a little arrow, which means that this file is not yet stored on my computer. I need to download this file. You'll also notice the same little cloud icon here. So what we need to do is to right-click and choose download, or just start using this resource and it will download. So I'm just going to download. So Vectorworks goes off, looks for that file, downloads it to my computer, and it stores it where it needs to in my computer so that it's at the right location so that Vectorworks can find it. You can't see the size of the thing you're importing, Mike, because it just doesn't show you, and also you don't know what size the file is that you're downloading. You would have to show in the Explorer in order to find that out. But ahead of time, Mike, no, there's nothing that lets you know what the size of that file is. But it's important to recognize that there are some files that Vectorworks knows exactly what's in them, but it hasn't downloaded them. So one of the big questions is, how does Vectorworks know what's in these files if it hasn't already downloaded them? Well, Vectorworks has changed the way the resource manager works from the ground up. So in the past, when you wanted to search for an item in Vectorworks, Vectorworks would look at each file individually. So you'd say, I want to search for a sanitary fixture, and Vectorworks would then go, okay, where do you want to look? And you'd say, I want to look in that folder. And then Vectorworks would open the files one at a time to look through them. Not anymore. What Vectorworks does now is to create a library catalog. So Vectorworks knows all about the objects that are in the library folders ahead of time. So Vectorworks knows what's in this file even before you've downloaded it. So it knows what they look like, it knows what objects are, it knows whether they've got any data attached to them, and so on. So when you do a search in Vectorworks, it doesn't search through the files individually, it looks through the library catalog. Now sometimes when you open Vectorworks, you'll see a message that says, your library needs updating. Do you want to update it? I suggest you click on yes and update the library catalog, because it's the library catalog that we're looking at here in order for Vectorworks to know where everything is. I think that's kind of an important strategy. It does make it a lot quicker to search, and we'll come up to searching later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import some things from the Vectorworks defaults. I'm going to import a gradient to start with. Actually, I might use a gradient would be good. So let's right-click and choose import, and that imports that file or that resource from that file and brings it into my untitled one. So I wanted to show you that you can right-click and you can duplicate a resource. Now quite often when I'm dealing with some of my resources, particularly things like doors and windows, I need another window symbol, which is really similar to one I've already got but maybe slightly different size. It's a lot quicker if you duplicate that resource rather than create it from scratch. So duplicate, then we get a chance to name it. I'm just going to give it that name to start with. And then we can right-click and edit it. Now depending on the resource that you select, you'll get a different editing window. If it's a symbol, you'll be asked if you want to edit the 2D or the 3D. If it's a window style, it'll open up the window editing dialog box. If it's a gradient, you'll get the gradient dialog box. If it's a hatch, you'll get the hatch dialog box. So it just depends. So here's my foliage. This is the blue bloom. I'm going to change this color. I'm going to make it a dark green color. And I'm not sure why I want it to go from blue or from turquoise. So I'm going to make it yellow. And this is my midpoint, so I can choose where the midpoint occurs. Click OK, and you can see I've just updated that resource. I could then drag and drop that resource. We could give that a different name maybe, foliage, and now I'm renaming it just by clicking on its name. I could right-click and choose rename, but I don't have to. So this is green, yellow. And then I can drag that back to my default gradients. It does not want me to do that. So let's open up my default gradients, or I could export it to my default gradients. So let's go right-click, let's export, and we'll send it to my user folder. It's because it's probably best if I put it in my user folder and I put it in my gradients, because it's an edited one. I shouldn't really affect the Vectorworks libraries. So it's just thinking about it at the moment. So it's got to open up the file. It's got to create, in this case it actually has to create a file because there wasn't a file there already. I was hoping it would be a little quicker than that. All right, so now it's done. So depending on the resource that you start with, it will affect the resource that you, the editing part. We can export resources and we can create resources. So one of the things you can do, remember I told you that you can choose what resources you're looking at, and then you can create a resource. So if I've chosen gradients at the top, I've got a new gradient button down the bottom. If I've got all resources, I can create a new resource of any type. Wall style, slab style, and so on. If I choose wall style and go create, I'll get my wall style dialog box, so I can then create a wall style. I can also create folders to arrange things in. So here I'm going to create a new folder. What sort of folder do I want to make? I can make a hatch folder, symbol folder. So at this point you might be thinking, do I have to store all my gradients into a gradient folder? You don't have to. But you can't store gradients into a hatch folder. You've got to put the same resources into that folder. So if I want to put all my gradients together, I've got to create a gradient folder, gradients. Then I can drag those into there. So I could create a new folder for textures, could call that a texture folder, RenderWorks texture folder. Textures. And then I could put all of these textures, and I've just held down my shift key, drag them, drop them into there, all my textures are in there. Now I can't create a new folder from that right click, but I can go here and I can create a new symbol folder. These are my 3D people. And so I can put my 3D person into my 3D people, and that would be a way of organizing your resources. When you start to build up a large library with lots and lots of resources, you might find it easier to create folders for everything. So if you're looking for fixtures or furniture, or you're looking for timber symbols, or you're looking for steel work or foundation details, it's a lot easier to find them because you've organized them together into groups. The folders that I've created, these folders here, are only living in that particular file. So if you want to create a folder in your user folder, where's my user folders here, then what you'll have to do is to open up this and then create your user folder, sorry, create your resource folder inside that file. So what are we going to talk about next? So we've arranged our resources. And just before we go too far, let's go back to the concept of the resource manager. Now I told you it's not just an update, or it's not just a cosmetic change to the old resource browser. So first of all, when we look at it, we've got this ability to choose what default content we want to look at. So I can just look at my favorites. We can search, we can have this list, we can have the thumbnails view, we can have our history back and forth, and we've got the preview. So it's got a lot of things going for it. but that's only part of it. Let's create a rectangle. And I want to assign that a hatch. I need to bring this out so you can see it more easily. So there's my hatch. So I want to choose a hatch. So I click here under my fill hatch, and now I've got a mini resource manager, which allows me to look through my favorites. It allows me to look through my user libraries. It allows me to look through my workgroup libraries or my subscription libraries. And you can reorder these to make it easier to find the ones that you want. So favorites first, then my user libraries. But you might notice right here that where it's got the defaults, my user library defaults, it's only showing me the folder for the hatches. So when I'm in the attributes palette and I'm looking for a hatch, Vectorworks will only show me hatches. Won't show me any other resource. Unlike here, where it can show you all kinds of different resources. So if I change this to look at gradients, and we turn these on, my user libraries, now my user library won't open because my user library does not have any gradients stored in the right location. Now you might remember that we just made one. Why isn't it there? You might remember earlier on I talked about the concept of having a library catalog. So I haven't updated my library catalog, so Vectorworks doesn't know that I've created a file in my user folder with a gradient in it. How do we update our library? Back to our gear button, we refresh our libraries, and now Vectorworks is going around looking through all of my default content, looking through my user folder, looking through my workgroup folder, even checking online to see if there are any updates to the Vectorworks libraries. Now this can take a little while, so we have to be patient, but this is an essential part of using your resource manager. Now if you don't update or don't refresh your libraries now, you can always refresh your libraries some other time. When will it happen? Well, normally if you've created additional content and then you go and restart Vectorworks, so you close down Vectorworks, tomorrow you open up Vectorworks, it says, oh, I see I need to refresh my libraries. Ah, okay, so I've got to wait for that. And so sometimes it can take a while. Now I've got a lot of favorites here. I've got a very large favorite file which has got everything I've created in it, so it's my entire library. So it takes a little while for Vectorworks to do the updating. I didn't think it was going to take quite as long as that, so I'm just going to cancel if I can. Hopefully I haven't unduly upset Vectorworks. What's it doing? It's writing the catalog. So sorry everybody, I should have thought ahead of time and removed some of my favorites so it was a little bit quicker, but we'll have to wait. So while we're waiting, let's just go over some of the important things. The resource manager is not just a single, a single palette here. It's actually been embedded right through Vectorworks. So if I choose a wall style, when I go to choose a wall, there's a little mini resource manager. And you can see it's showing me just the styles that I've got. So it only shows walls. If I choose to create a slab, where's my slab tool? It'll show me slabs. So again, it's this mini resource manager. If I go to create plants, again, I've got this little resource manager. So there's it's quite an important technique when you're doing this to remember that the resource manager has actually been embedded, not quite, but almost everywhere throughout Vectorworks. So every time Vectorworks looks for a resource, it's really looking through the resource manager to find some of the resources. Now there's a couple of tools that haven't been updated yet. I don't know for sure, but my guess is eventually everything will be based on the resource manager. So I think it's time now to look at some advanced topics. We're going to look at searching and some other things like that. So first of all, let's search. So I want to search for a particular thing. So let's turn all these on. I want to choose where I'm searching. I'm going to search everywhere. I'm going to include records, and it starts with or contains the word. So what are we looking for? We're looking for something to do with our cladding. Now you guys call it siding, I think. Siding, so let's have a look. Are there any things that I might use in terms of siding? So there's a whole lot of textures, there's a whole lot of hatches. I actually use the word weatherboard. When I search for weatherboard, it brings up my wall styles and some symbols, some hatches, brings up a symbol, brings up a detail. So maybe the question is, why does it bring up some of those things? Let's just have a look. So we've told it to look everywhere. We've told it to ignore records. We've told it to include records. We've told it anywhere that it contains the word weatherboard. So that's obvious because it says weatherboard. This is obvious because it says weatherboard as part of the name. And these say weatherboard wall. So it should find these because it's part of the name of the object. But why on earth would it choose a detail called footing if it's not part of the name? Vectorworks 2017 introduces a new concept with your resources called tagging. Now if you're used to using a website or a database, then tags should be familiar. The idea of a tag is that you can attach information to this detail, non-printing information, and that will allow you to find it. So you might notice that I've added the tag concrete slab, slab edge, footing, and weatherboards. Same with this one, it has weatherboard as a tag on that object. So does that one, and so does that one. So it allows you to use tags on your resources so you can collect together resources that are similar. So one of the things I thought of that you might do is you might start to tag your resources based on the type of construction you're using. So from an architectural point of view, if you're using plaster or stucco, you might have details, wall styles, textures, door styles maybe. These all might be appropriate for a stucco building. Why not tag them so that you can then go up here and type in stucco? I don't think I've got any stucco. Certainly not walls and doors. But it brings up all my stucco textures. But what about if it brought up my doors, my windows, my window detailing? Wouldn't that be quite cool to have all of those resources available in a single place when you're looking for them? So let's go through how we add a tag. So right click, we can add a tag, and this is a person. We can also edit the tags. So we might put person, we might put red dress. Red dress, and OK. So now I can go back to my resource manager and I can search for red dress. Now I've got a spelling mistake. I've got an image prop I use quite often. It's got a blonde haired lady in it. You know, if I had the ability to tag them, I would have put blonde, and then I could go, oh, where did I put that? Type in blonde, and it would find that resource for me straight away. In this case, it actually picked up this one. Where is it? Where's this one from? Let's just have a look. So we look there. It's in my favorites. It's in my library. What about this one? It's in my untitled. So those are two different resources. They might actually end up being the same one, but there are two different resources that it's found based on that tagging. So are there any questions about that so far? Because we're going to get into some default content now. Okay. So we have our user folder, and the user folder has a specific structure to deal with libraries, defaults, and also object styles. So let's have a look for our default content. To its preferences, user folders, and explore. So I'm just going to bring it from the other screen. It's just popped open on my other screen. So here it is here. Is it gone? Is that it? Here's my user folder. So this is my Vectorworks user folder. I'll just hide all these bits. Libraries, defaults. So all of my default content should be stored in my user folder under defaults. And if you're using a multi-person office, then you should be using a workgroup folder, which is similar but slightly different. The structure is certainly the same. So here I've got gradients. What have I got? I've got exported gradients. So I have a file inside gradients. Hatches need to be stored here, images fills need to be stored there, audio tools there, BIM object things there, cabinets, repetitive unit things need to be stored there. Just need to make this smaller. And let's scroll down, but not walls. Why aren't walls there? Because walls are now in object styles. Let's have a look in object styles. So these are things like columns, cabinets, plants are stored here, windows are doors, walls are stored here, tables and chairs, doors and windows are stored here, the door is stored there, and the window is stored down here. And if you're using Window, it'll be stored in your object styles as well. So in the old days, there used to be one place to go for all of your default content, the defaults folder. And it was always a bit of a hassle to manage that because everything's got to be stored in the right place and you have to grab it from one version of Vectorworks and migrate it to the next one. We got the migration manager, which helps. But now we've got this other one as well, object styles. So now we've got two quite complex folders to manage for all of your default content. So I'm thinking that maybe instead of having two large folders to manage with all my default content, that maybe there's an easier way. What if we turn off our user folder, if we turn off the Vectorworks stuff and we just have our favorite? Couldn't I just put all of my gradients into my favorite file? So those are the ones that I want to use. What if I made this into a hatch? Could I store all of my hatches in my favorites? There's all my hatches. What about my gradients? We've done that, done hatches, tiles. What about plants? Could I store my plants in my favorites? I certainly could. There are none, but that would be another way to do it. What about my wall styles? Could I store those in my favorites? It's a slab. Let's have a look. Oh, there's all my slab styles. What about my walls? Could I store those in my favorite? And I'm going to turn off that, and turn off that one. So I've only got one place to look for my favorites or for my default content, and that's my library file. So the idea might be, it's just an idea, you don't have to do it this way. Instead of putting all of those resources in all of those different locations, maybe another way to do it is to think of having a single file for putting all those things. Now, as I think I said earlier, this isn't going to work for everything. There's a couple of things where you still need to put information in your default content. One of those is this one, the framing member. When you create a custom profile and you look in the profile symbol, it is still not yet aware of the resource manager and it's still using the standard default content folder. So this is looking in the content folder in your user folder, and so you have to put your information in there, or you have to bring it into your current document before you can use it. The repetitive unit, I think, is the same. Let's have a look at the repetitive unit. Choose the symbol. So it's not yet aware of the resource manager either. So there's just one or two things that you can't use the single file for, but the way around that is you then go to your single file. So we can hide our user libraries, we can hide our Vectorworks libraries, and we can hide our subscription libraries, and that just leaves me with my favorites. Now, I think I've got a folder for my repetitive units. Did it say framing member custom profiles? There we are. So what do I want? I want to import this, so I import that. Now when I go to use my framing member, I can go and create a custom profile, choose my profile from my current document, and there's my joist. So it's a little bit of extra work if you don't want to use your default content, but you can still do it. You can still get around it. So Barbara, are there any questions?
Let me see. No. Yeah, no.
Doesn't seem like there are any questions that need answering. I thought that there would be a lot of questions.
Me too, but I guess our audience is very literate.
All right then everybody, well that's as much as I wanted to cover about the user folder unless you've got a question. So if you've got a question, let's have the questions.
I know you see the comment, right?
I do see the comments. So I'm curious whether somebody wants to either suggest that I'm right or argue with me about this idea of using a single library, because in the past when you were using the resource browser, you never had the option of having a single library file with everything in it. It always had to be all of these separate folders, all in the correct locations. Now I've done a complete about turn. So for many years it always had to be, you've got to put the correct default content in the correct location, otherwise you won't see it. And now I'm saying, just chuck it all in together and it's in your single resource file. Someone's just asked where the how I find the user folder. So it's this button here, Vectorworks Preferences. It shows you where your user folder is. Click on the Explore button and it will open that folder for you so you can see it. Cancel that, cancel that. I'm just having a read through these questions. They're starting to come in thick and fast now, so I'll just have a look through. Someone's got questions, but they're not pertinent to this topic. Great. You can always email me if you want. I'm sure that Vectorworks are aware that some of these need to be updated. Remember that Vectorworks is a complex program, and sometimes they have to do things a bit at a time. So they've done a lot of work. I'm sure they're just going to pick up the little ones later on. Little number 2 is some objects because they're 2D only. These objects are 2D only. They've got no 3D content. Other objects, where's some of my 3D objects? Fixtures and furniture should certainly have 3-dimensional objects. And you see my 3D objects, they actually display them as 3D. They used to have a little 2 and a little 3. I think what they've done now is if it's got 2, it's a 2D object, and if it's got nothing, it's both 2D and 3D. And as you run your cursor over, it actually tells you 2D and 3D symbol. Resource browser seems very slow with a lot of favorites. Is there a workaround? I don't tend to have, well, I've got a single, I don't know if you've noticed, but I don't have too many favorites in my file. I've just got a few. And it's pretty quick to go through. So but one of the things I do, if you have a look, I've made sure that I've put lots of stuff inside folders so it's all collected together. So if I'm looking for foundations, I don't have to look through everything. If I want timber, I don't have to look for everything, and I've got all my pieces of timber in here. If I want doors, there are my doors, fixtures, there they are, furniture, there they are. I think that's reasonably quick the way that it jumps between one folder and another, but I think that there's a real problem with a human being being able to look through thousands of things without grouping them together. I just don't think we're that good at doing it. I quite like the idea of the single resource or the single resource folder or file. I think it works reasonably well. Doesn't work, as I said, doesn't work everywhere, but I'm going back to the idea of just having a single place to find everything. Now that does mean that that file becomes rather large. Show an Explorer, that file's now 200 megabytes. So it's a pretty big file now. The questions are coming in. Any opinion on storing Dropbox, storing workgroup folders on Dropbox? So the question about, do I have any opinion on storing a workgroup folder on Dropbox so I can access on other computers? That is exactly what I do with my Dropbox folder. And the favorite that I showed you, my ArchonCAD library favorite, is stored on Dropbox. So if I make changes on this computer, when I go to my other computer, I will find my updated library file on that other computer. So I'm a big fan of using Dropbox to keep your workgroup folders in sync. If the name of the symbol is in blue, it means it's going to convert to a group. So this one here will convert to a group when I place it, but the one in black will not. If it's red, it will convert to a plugin object, and if it's green, then it is, I think I've got some detail references, drawing symbols. The green ones are using page units rather than world units, so regardless of the scale of the layer, these always look the same. Someone was asking about, they've been creating lots of textures and adjusting the shaders, a lot of instability related to that. I'm not sure that it's to do with anything in particular. I haven't noticed it myself, but please make sure that you're using your latest service pack. It should be using SP2, and I don't know when SP3 is going to come out, but if they need to, they'll bring one out. Well, someone's asked me if I've got any comment on the ease of migration of customizing of the resource manager with future versions of Vectorworks. Well, I can't really comment on future versions because I don't know. But I know that with the resource manager, it's extremely easy for me to look for all of my content inside a single file. I also know that it's really easy to update that file just by opening it in the new version of Vectorworks. And then I just have to store it and then link it to my new version of Vectorworks. So in the past, I used to spend a little bit of time trying to manage my default content, making sure I had it in the right place, migrating it from one version to the other. I tend to be a little lazy or look for a trick which is time efficient, you might call it. And I think that having a single file is going to be really, really easy for upgrading. Someone's asked me to explain the difference between a user library and a favorites library. The user library is the default content that follows the structure, and a favorite is a single file you've connected. So if we go back to my Vectorworks preferences, back to Explore, libraries, why is that not opening? Libraries, here we are, defaults. So the user library is everything that's in all of these folders. It's the entire structure. So the user library is not a single file, it's a whole series of files stored in folders in a very specific structure. Gradients are stored here, and so there has to be a file stored there. So the difference is that a user library is looking in an entire folder structure at defaults, favorites, object styles, and there's stuff in all of these. Well, there should be or could be. I don't use it very often. Whereas a favorite is quite different. It's just a single file that you have connected. So if I remove this favorite, it's no longer there. And that means that whenever I go to create something, it's not going to be there. So now I need to go back and I need to add a new favorites file. Add new favorite files. I need to find it. It's in my Dropbox and I actually have to look for it. So it's over here somewhere. I've forgotten where I left it. Down here, project folders, 2017. There it is. So I just have a single file that I add. And it makes it quite easy for me to migrate from one version to another because it's just a single file. And as I showed you, when I go to create a wall, where do I look? Oh, I just look at my library. They're all my walls. I think it's, I've been looking for where the problem with this might be. I've been looking at, maybe I'm wrong with this single file idea because it just seems like it's too easy. So far I haven't found any issues other than those ones that it won't work with, like, you know, the framing member, the repetitive unit. But I'm guessing that they'll be fixed. And even if they're not, it's just a small, it's not much of a hassle to copy them from my library, and it's very quick. It just means that I've only got one place to look. I don't want to think too hard. I don't want to have too many problems looking for stuff. So that's what I tend to do. I was just reading a question. It says, could I go over again how to add an existing file to your favorites? I tried it where it says add new favorite file, but it puts in a folder and then does not seem to exist in the resource. And I'm not sure about the last question, which was, you could create an unfixed file too. I'm not sure what's meant by that. I don't know what the issue might be with create new favorites. You're not using this one by mistake, are you, Bruce? The add new favorites folder. Because if it puts a folder, if you add new favorites files, choose the file, okay, open, you get a chance to select the destination folder. So it's either at the root level, or it's inside courses, or it's inside that. You do not have to create a new folder, so choose root, and then OK, and it will add it right there underneath that one. And you can see I've now got two. So remove from favorites. Well, I think that's about it, Barbara, unless there are other really pressing questions. I've got another one to go to.
No, that's it. But before you go, I would love if you could, you know, plug your website a little bit and tell everybody where they can. Yeah, right. Good. I'm sure you're always prepared.
My self-promotion. Those of you that don't know, I used to write training manuals for Vectorworks, which I'm no longer doing. Before Vectorworks were printing them, I used to write them myself and publish them myself. But now I've converted those manuals into online courses. The feedback from these courses is really, really positive. So there's a lot of courses here. I think you should try them. If you don't want to try those, try my subscription website. Every month we get together for manuals like the handout. I showed you the full version of that. We have then workshops based on on that topic. So you could have had this a couple of weeks ago, and you would have had you could have stopped me and asked me questions. I give you the full manual, and then this week I've been having 3D modeling special interest group, landmark special interest group, architect special interest group, where it's interactive. You get a chance to speak to me direct, stop me, ask me questions. It's amazing.
You do package a great product, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Yeah, so check it out. That's all I can, recommend. And I will have to take the screen back and wrap it up. Thanks, so you Barbara. Can move on to your next endeavor.
Oh,
I want to
go and get my coffee.
Yes, I want to thank everybody for attending today. And I want to remind everyone to visit our webpage at novedge.com, where you can find the entire Vectorworks product line. Novedge is the best way to buy design software, but so give it a try. And for information on the latest specials, new releases, join the Novedge network. We're on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Next week on our webinar series, What's New in Creo 4.0. And to rewatch today's webinar or previous ones, check out our Novedge YouTube and Vimeo channels. Our webinar playlist has webinars for every software taste. Thanks again, Jonathan, for joining us and for your really fantastic expertise. And thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Bye-bye.